Well, it's that time of year again, MotoGP season preview. Can you believe it's came around this quickly? I can't really understand where the winter time has gone. MotoGP's back, and yeah, we're here to give our listed predictions, which will probably look good in 9 months' time or really bad. That's a given there. Joining me, Jordan Morland, is Lewis Duncan and Pete McLaren. I think we'll jump straight in, guys, to biggest surprise of the season. It could be a person, a team, a bike. I don't know, Pete. What's your thoughts on biggest surprise?
I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is a new winner, new race winner. Who might be a candidate there? I think, obviously Alex Marquez has stood out in winter testing, isn't he? In that regard, Pedro Acosta. I mean, it's not going to be much of a surprise, is it? But let's be honest, KTM haven't won for a few years, so in that regard, it would be a bit of a milestone if he does get a win. So those guys there. Looking beyond that, I mean, I think Joan Mir on the Honda. I think if he follows up this kind of testing performances, could he fight for a podium? I think that would be a real shock to get Honda back onto the podium, really show that they have turned the corner since the Marc Marquez era. Mm-hmm. I think probably those would be up there for me.
Yeah, Lewis?
In terms of biggest shock, I think the biggest shock would be if Marc Marquez doesn't dominate this championship. Really, even with the Ducati having a 24 engine, even with it starting with 24 chassis and aero, obviously there are some 25 bits on it that aren't on those other bikes. So you just look at the confidence, you look at the on the bike, off the bike. I think there was a bit of a worry that Mark being a factory rider again kind of maybe bring about that kind of corporate cold side of him that maybe we saw sometimes at Honda. But you look at like his television appearances recently during his, birthday celebrations and kind of his overall sort of social media presence. This looks like a rider that more relaxed than maybe we've ever seen him before. And usually when Mark's in that kind of headspace, that's when he knows he can win. Whatever he says, Pecco's favourite. We need to get a base going, consistently fight for wins first. Whatever he knows that he's going in here with the best chance to win a championship for the first time since breaking his arm. So yeah, and you just look at the preseason. Pecco didn't have a great preseason. We haven't really seen what he can do. The other Ducatis have been quick, but nowhere near as good as Mark. The world champion Jorge Martin's not been on the bike all winter. There's just the door's been left wide open for Mark to just come in this sort of start of the season and really stamp his authority. We've got good tracks for him, for his riding style, for his ability to feel a lack of grip. You think Austin, you think Argentina. I find it really, really hard to see anyone other than Mark dominating this championship.
Yeah, he's talked about the sort of change there. His TV appearances, how different he seems. Just to touch on that, do you think it's a change of management that he had near 2 years ago now that have kind of helped that sort of side of him? Because he's on TV and he's like, I've seen a couple of clips, he's like giving his brother the middle finger and stuff to the camera, which is like pretty funny. And his social media presence he shows a lot more of his life now compared to maybe we used to, and he was at Honda and under his previous management with Emilio Alzamora. How much do you think that's helped him live and become a person now? It's comfortable in his own skin. It seems he's really found his footing, hasn't he? In the paddock, especially.
Yeah, well, I think Alzamora kind of had a bit of a reputation for being quite a difficult person, particularly with the media, and I guess that probably filtered down to his riders. There was maybe a bit more of a strict sort of policy to follow in terms of how you project yourself, how you sell yourself. Ultimately, as an athlete, you are a marketing tool. You market yourself through not only your results, but how you project your kind of your life, really, especially now in the social media age. And maybe the market, maybe the change in the management has maybe freed them up a little bit. You look at the two of them now, Mark and Alex, and you kind of look at the brand partnerships they have. Mark's social media kind of profile is very much focused on him and his relationship with his girlfriend, and she's obviously kind of quite popular and with brands and stuff like that, and I think that's rubbed off as well. I think that's been a very positive influence there. But overall, I guess it just comes with age and experience. He had this injury and years of not knowing really if his career could go any far, and obviously 2023 didn't know how much longer he could go really with the form of the bike. He wasn't sure about his body, and I just think ultimately, when you've gone through, everyone who's listening who's ever gone through a pretty tough time knows that when you come out the other side of that, your kind of view on life is just that little bit different. You are a bit more relaxed. You try and enjoy things more because you know what can be on the other side.
Yeah.
So I think fundamentally it's that. Mark's a racer. He's 32 now. He knows his career's not got too many more years left in him, and he wants to get back to winning ways. And yeah, I just think all of this is just kind of the move to Ducati last year with Grassini, and that team really bringing up his spirits again, and obviously him finding the results again, getting the factory seat, showing whether he wants to admit it or not, showing that power that he still has in MotoGP when he was able to bully his way into that factory ride.
Yeah,
and obviously to then hit the ground running in pre-season, really have the team kind of working around him by the looks of it. You see pictures all the time of Tardozzi, Dall'Igna seem to be, and Marquez's side of the garage seems to be a lot of joke and seems to be a lot of laughter, maybe more than we've ever kind of seen before over the last few years at Ducati. So I think all of these things are a factor here.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I completely agree. So I do. My biggest surprise, I have two here, but I think I'm going to go with the Quartararo one. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people in terms of how competitive he's going to be. Obviously, we know how good he is. So I do think the Yamaha has made pretty much a level above again from where it was last year, and that's a good thing. I think he's going to, maybe early on the season, really catch people out and kind of get a few podiums here and there, and then we get into the European swing. I think he's going to really surprise. I think he can win a Grand Prix, to be honest. If it falls in his favour, he'll need a lot of things to go his way. Mainly the factory Ducati boys not being at the front. But yeah, who knows? Anything can happen in a season. I think that, he will be top 5 in the championship. I think it will surprise many people. That's my one. Let me go to the opposite end, Pete. Biggest disappointment. Who or what is that going to be for you?
Good question, isn't it? Yeah. The biggest disappointment will be if, to be honest, the championship is all, and this follows up from what Lewis says, if the championship is all done and dusted with about 6 rounds to go. I think for me, after we've had the last 2 years of going down to the wire, close title showdowns, we've almost come to expect it now, haven't we? But this season is, with Martin's injury as well, it really is just a 2-horse race at the moment. The riders themselves all seem to be, it's either Mark, who most of them are picking for the championship, or it's Pecco. There really isn't anyone else who's in the championship picture at the moment. And potentially, we don't know how it's going to go. It's 22 rounds at the moment. It's a long season, but we could see a championship wrapped up a long way before the end. Certainly Mark's previous championships, weren't they? If, at Honda, the last one he won, 2019? It was at Burrum, ironically, wasn't it? Where he wrapped it up with multiple races to go. So I don't think we'll see that from Mark this year. I think we'll see maybe the most complete Marc Marquez we've seen so far. I don't think he's going to dominate all of the wins. I think he's very much eyes on the prize, which is the World Championship. There's no other reason to join the factory Ducati team other than to go for the World Championship. He could have won races at Grassini, had that great relaxed lifestyle, if you like, stayed teammate to his brother. We now know he would have been on a GP24. He obviously didn't know that at the time, but he's gone into the factory team, put himself into that pressure cooker environment, really, where he's expected to fight for the title. He said that in the preseason launch. He knows that's what's expected of him. He's not getting any younger. I think he'll be the oldest champion of the MotoGP era, won't he? Which was a surprise to him as well. But actually, he'll be older than Rossi. When he won, his last title, obviously Rossi did fight for it again, 6 years later in 2015, and came very close. But still, the point is that Mark's there, I think, with the mission of going for this championship and winning it. And I think that we saw it last year as well. He's not going to throw points away. I think he does know now that you don't need to win every race. Going back to 2019, and he beat Quartararo, what was it, the last corner to win in Burrum, even though he didn't need to beat him to win the World Championship. I don't think we'll see that kind of Marc Marquez this year. I think with everything that's gone on, it will be a more, let's say, maybe more complete Marc Marquez who knows when to push and when not to. But a lot depends on these opening rounds, I think. It'd be interesting to see how he plays it. Do they go all out to attack, put the pressure on the other teammate? This is also, could this be Pecco's strategy as well? He's kept his cards under wraps, hasn't he, Pecco? We haven't seen a sprint simulation, a race simulation from him. So what did he think when he saw Mark's, that pace that Mark was setting? We don't know. Did he look at it and think, I'm in trouble here? Or did he think, you know what? I could have done that. We don't know. I mean, this is so Pecco's kept his cards close to his chest. The fast lap that Mark did was slightly slower than Pecco in qualifying. Pecco has the advantage of the data from the GP24, which again, maybe for the early rounds, it's the exact same bike he rode last year. Maybe, and then as the year goes on, and as you guys have quite rightly said, the bike will then develop, and I think then it'll become a bit more even. They put a new aero package on, the old settings from last year might not be as relevant again. But starting the year, certainly, and more the tracks after Bury Run that haven't been tested on, Pecco knows he's got setups there that will work. And, everybody, all of us included, all looking at Mark, in a way, kind of takes the pressure off Pecco, doesn't it? So, yeah, let's see. But I think, my biggest disappointment will be if actually it's all done and dusted way before the end of the season. I hope it goes down to the wire. And to be honest, I hope more than anything they both stay fit and healthy, because we've already had Jorge Martin, haven't we, who's had this massive setback now and is already playing catch up. So let's hope that everybody stays in the fight as long as possible.
Lewis, biggest disappointment for you?
I mean, just to pick up on Pete's point, it's an interesting one, because you look at 2019 and Marquez dominated that, but there was so many so many close races, so many like those last lap battles. It never really felt like it lost its interest. Even towards the end of the season after he'd won, you had it was still that pressure from Quartararo in races, and remember that Sepang qualifying where he crashed heavily, and there was still quite a lot in there. And I think from MotoGP's point of view, and I'm probably going to upset some people, it kind of works in its favor if Marquez on a factory bike can get back to dominating and really steal the headlines, because as I'm sure everyone who works in MotoGP media knows, the number one traffic driver is Marc Marquez. The people that he's the one that sells the tickets now. He's the one that people come to see, much like in those Rossi days. We remember that fondly, but if you actually look at the results and look at the the championship battles, those were walkovers for much of his career. But he still drew a crowd. He still drew all that interest. You think Michael Schumacher, you think Lewis Hamilton, kind of latterly. If you are a character with charisma that Marquez is, then being a dominant force is actually in some ways just as good as having a tight championship battle. Because you look at the last couple of years and Pecco versus Martin, honestly, for you two, is that really going to be championship battles that go down as being the most sort of spine tingling in MotoGP history?
Yeah, I get what you mean. It kind of, for me, to touch on that point, you mentioned the names. I'm going to go outside of MotoGP into sport. I think of, say, American sports. You go back to the 90s, Michael Jordan. I mean, single-handedly carried the NBA on his back, and I think whether people like it or not, it carried on through Kobe Bryant into LeBron James, and it kind of had that effect. And in the NFL, it was like it too. Tom Brady was in his 40s, but he was in his peak, and people wanted to see him win. You need the names of the big names of the sport, and whether people like this or not, they are the people that people want to watch and tune into every week. If they're fighting for wins and they're fighting for championships, it's the key for us as sport to succeed. And that is why when I look at Verstappen versus Hamilton in 21, it was the culmination of seeing the great Lewis Hamilton of the past 10 years go up against the young kid who almost came into his championship era then, and you got that explosion. We're not talking about what happened at the end of it, but obviously it was great for that whole year. Do you get what I mean, Lewis?
Yeah.
You need that in sport, don't you?
100%. You look at any sport has it. Like people like seeing records broken. Whether if Mark goes on to beat Rossi's records, it will be something people want to see. Even if you're not that big a fan, you'll want to see it, because it's like, well, these have stood for so long, and now the benchmark gets raised. It's like in the NHL right now with Alex Ovechkin going after Wayne Gretzky's goal record. It's something that stood since when did Gretzky retire? The late 90s, you know, and we never thought we'd see it. And now, you know, this veteran's 20 goals away or something like that from it. It's, you know, whether you kind of want that record to go, whether Gretzky's your favorite, you know, whether you can still consider him the greatest of all time, you still kind of want to see those benchmarks go. And I think that's the same with Marquez. And, you know, let's see, it works in the favor of the other guys as well, because if they can then come along and actually challenge him or really push him to the wire, then all of a sudden you kind of get this new value placed on people like Bagnaia, people like Jorge Martin if he's fit. You know, we know there's riders out there like Fabio Quartararo, for example, if he was on a competitive bike, you know, we'd up there Pedro Acosta as well. If anything, it's one of the great losses of the last sort of 5 years is that we were just gearing up for what you were saying there, Jordan, with kind of Verstappen, Hamilton, Quartararo, Mark. You know, that would have been great 2020, 21 and Mark not been injured. You know, I think that would have kind of defined this kind of
100%
latest era. Unfortunately, it's not been the case. So yeah, sorry, I've gone well off course from your original question. Biggest disappointment is quite a harsh one, really, to sort of say to someone you're going to be underwhelming this year before it's even started. But I think for me, the biggest disappointment would be if this move for Jorge Martin just proves to be just was really the wrong thing for his career, because Ducati they didn't give him the factory right, but they didn't kick him out the brand. Ultimately, there was a factory bike there for him at Pramac if he wanted. He stood up on his own two legs, went, fine, I want to be a factory rider, I will go somewhere that can give that. But in doing so, he's kind of put pride before results. And, you know, we've seen it before. We've seen other riders who've gone and made, you know, successful riders make big changes of manufacturing. It's not worked. Valentino Rossi being a really perfect example of that.
Yep.
Of, you know, he was still at the peak of his powers in 2010. You know, he probably would have fought, you know, been a bit closer in that championship, maybe would have won it had it not been for the leg break. But he was kind of scared off into the Ducati move, you know, unhappy with Yamaha. They put their faith in Lorenzo, and he's gone, well, I'm going to go and take the big money, you know, move at a bike that clearly isn't competitive. And, well, look what happened there. I think that's, for me, would be the biggest disappointment if this Martin move doesn't work out, because genuinely, Aprilia looks in a good way. The team looks really invigorated by it, and I think he looks like he could be a genuinely good leader for a factory project. I just hope it works out, because then you're looking at a guy who could have fought for World Championships this year. Is probably maybe the rider better placed to challenge Mark on equal machinery than Pecco, kind of based on what we saw last year. Yeah, that would, for me, be the biggest disappointment if this doesn't work out, or at least show this year that it is gonna work out.
Yeah, I think for me, disappointment-wise, I'd be disappointed if Pedro Acosta doesn't win a race, if it's either a sprint or a Grand Prix. I think that would be my number one, because when we get further down the predictions, I'll give you my position for Acosta, because I think for what I seen in pre-season, we kind of touched on it the last podcast about a rider being able to mask the deficiencies of a bike. I think he's, honestly, in MotoGP, he's top 3 talent, and how the modern style is, he's the one I think is going to bring it to the next level for the next generation of riders. They'll look at him as the guy. I think if he doesn't win a race, I'll be really disappointed, because he got so close last year, and he had the fire burning there as a rookie. And I think if you have it as a rookie and you mature, which I think he has done, I think he's going to win a race. Where that is, who knows with the KTM, and like I said, we had this debate that if he's going to be the one that will make the difference. But if he doesn't get a win somehow this year, like I say, sprint or Grand Prix, yeah, that for me will be pretty disappointing, because I think he is well capable of doing it. So he is. Yeah, second and third in the championship, I think we can kind of look at that if you want. Pete, do you have 2 riders that you think are going to place behind the champion before we give our champion after?
Well, process of elimination. I think I would just add on the disappointment side, the one thing that has been lacking in these past few years, and you know, this was highlighted in the Bagnaia and Martin battles, is really they didn't race head to head that often, did they? So that's what I do hope, because this does look more than ever to be a jewel of a season between these two guys. Let's hope that they do actually, race head to head, because then I think you can build that momentum during the year of the one guy against the other guy and that competition, that head to head thing. If it ends up with one of them dominates the sprints, the other one dominates on a Sunday, and then they end up pretty close on points or something, that would be a great shame. I think what we want to see is them going head to head, as we saw in Jerez last year, wasn't it? But also, it's by no means guaranteed. You think that it would be if guys are fighting for the championship, the exchanging race wins. But as we saw last year, guys on the same bike, okay, they weren't the same team, but they're on the same bike, and yet would rarely meet in a race. So, yeah, let's hope that we do get one of these great rivalries. You can pick them. We all know the Prost Senna sort of things. If you go to another championship, it's got the potential, isn't it? This year has got the potential to give us that kind of season, and they could both benefit from that. Whether it's Mark or Pecco, they can both come out of it. Whoever's champion, if they fight strongly against each other and raise their standing within the sport and outside of it. So, yeah, I really hope actually that we see a lot more head-to-head battles. It reminded me of, we're having the discussion about the Sepang race and how for the first few laps, that was the only time we actually saw them really go at it. And that's why it stood out last year. But yeah, let's hope we see a lot more of those battles. Second and third in the chat. Well, third, I think third actually is probably, that's an open one, isn't it? That's quite a Costa to pick up from where you've just explained. He's got the potential to do it, but is the KTM going to be consistent enough over the season? If you're looking beyond the red team, shall we say, I think you're looking at Alex Marquez. If he can do the consistency, he could be up there. I mean, Bezecchi again. We don't know yet, do we? But certainly, if this pace carries on, he could be in there. Martin. We just don't know. He's done 13 laps, hasn't he? He's done 13 laps this year, and probably not on the bike that he's going to get on in Thailand, because I think it was only the last day of the Room test that he actually, he said he wanted all the parts that he was going to race on the bike and do some setup work. So that tells you that probably the bike that they had, certainly on day one at Sepang, wasn't anything like the bike that they finished with at Room. So really, Martin's going into it's impossible to know, isn't it? I mean, but we have seen before, thinking of, Jorge Lorenzo moving to Ducati, everyone expecting him as the multiple champion to lead that team. And then it ended up being Dovi, didn't it? Dovi, of course, had more years of experience. But maybe Bez can do that. Maybe Bez can be that guy who everyone's looking at the big star on the other side of the garage. And he's got the chance now, especially on a solid preseason as he's had, to take that momentum forward. Let's see. I think those guys are certainly in the frame for the top three. Quartararo potentially, but again, it's hard to know, isn't it? They've only tested on really two tracks. Okay, Barcelona, but with the 25 bikes. But yeah, those guys I think would be up there.
Give me an answer. Give me second and third. Give me what? Give me the names. I want the
second
names.
and third. Well, I'll go Bagnaia second, and I'll go Acosta third.
Okay, do you know what? Save me time. That's exactly who my second and third are. Nicely done, Pete. Yeah, as you explained, I think. Well, people are probably listening. Like, oh my god, he put such and such as world champion. Listen, this is just a prediction. This isn't set in stone. It's Crash MotoGP podcast. This isn't the be all and end all. So it is. You can come back in 9 months' time and judge then. So you can. But let's see. Lewis, who's your second and third?
Yeah, well, I mean, who's to say that Raul Fernandez isn't going to be the world champion? I think people need to really not get ahead of themselves. I think second and third. I think you're looking. Yeah, Pecco is probably kind of in there. I think third. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I have some sort of like allergy or something. I really find it very, very difficult to put Acosta in that picture. Yes, he's good. He's really good, but like as we saw in Buriram, that KTM doesn't hold on to its tires. Yeah. They have a lot of problems. There's like we said as well. There's not really kind of a standout kind of strength that KTM can exploit round to round, because really the only kind of thing that stands out about that bike is the braking capability that Acosta is able to manage on that. And there's really only one circuit where that really comes into its own. Motegi.
Mm-hmm.
The consistency of the KTM has always been lackluster. I think we're yet to see, obviously, is Acosta able to iron out those problems? You'd like to crashes. You'd like to think that maybe he can do that from rookie season to the next, but then you look at some of kind of our better rookies over the last sort of few years, and you look at how many times they crashed in races versus sort of Pedro did. Marquez had a bit of a reputation for crashing, but his results were there. Fabio was the same. There's just something about that whole situation. I just can't see, other than on the odd weekend and, where everything will click together. I just can't see that being a consistent challenge. Certainly not over someone like Alex Marquez. He's got the bike under him. He's been strong all preseason, and he was strong towards the end of last year as well. Let's not forget, I think we kind of focused very much on his performance on the 24, but like Sepang, Barcelona, very, very good weekends from Marquez. He was not that far off getting onto the podium on an unfancy GP23. There was a clear breakthrough towards the end of the season in terms of what he needed to kind of get the best out of that package, and that's obviously carried over because it's then meant he's been able to dig deeper into his own riding style. And we saw in 2022, on his first year on the Ducati, that there's clearly something there that makes Alex, potentially, kind of a front running rider in MotoGP. And I think with the GP24, I think with the fact he's got his brother still alongside him, more or less on the same bike, that they can kind of share data with, and I just think that's kind of like what we've seen with Bastianini in the past, with Bez, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where that's going to go. I certainly think Marquez over Digia and that kind of satellite Ducati battle, and certainly over Morbidelli. I think Alex Marquez is kind of clearly the better rider there.
I was going to ask that. Out of those, it sounds harsh on Digia. He's kind of like, yes, he has the same machine as Marquez and Bagnaia in the factory team, but is he on that pedestal? He's like floats in between, doesn't he, almost, because he's the only other one. And the 24 is, as we've seen, like you say, it's been so good in testing. Plus, he's missed testing as well, effectively. The only thing I have with Alex Marquez, I can't fully commit to putting him inside the top 3, because the past 2 years I've seen him have great results. Then there's this kind of dip where it's kind of off and he's not really fully on it. I want to see him consistently be top 5, top 6 every weekend, because he can't do that. It's just sometimes I just can't commit to putting him in the top 3 here for me, because he'd be in my top 6 in the championship. But yeah, I just think he needs things to go his way almost, and kind of be the one to pick up the pieces. So yeah, I get what you mean, though, Lewis. He's definitely trended in the right way. And if you can go back even further, in his earlier days in Moto 2 and Moto 3, I mean, he took 5 years to win the Moto 2 championship. So is he just a person that takes a bit of time to adapt to a class? Do you think that's fair to say with Alex?
Well, it was kind of the same with Digia. We were ready to kind of write him off, and then obviously went on and won a Grand Prix, and he was always adamant that his timeline for growth was absolutely spot on for what it should be. So yeah, I mean, some riders do take a while. We saw that with Zarco as well in Moto 2. It took him a good few years before he was then kind of the dominant sort of force in that class. MotoGP was kind of quick from the off, but then look how long it took him to win a Grand Prix. So yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely riders that take a little bit of time to get going. I think Alex Marquez is kind of, over the past few years, really, since he stepped onto the Ducati, has been a bit more of a consistent kind of pest inside the top 8. And I just think with the GP24 now, it suits his riding style. Yes, Mark's going to maybe be a bit more kind because it's his brother, but like, he's seen the data. He's seen the data through all the preseason, and he knows where Alex is stronger. And I think there is something to be read into from that. And yeah, you just think with all the other kind of factory moves and stuff like that, we need to see Aprilia be a bit more consistent than it has done over the few years. KTM the same, Yamaha, Honda, we don't know. There is still just that door open for a year-old Ducati, which is, well, it's really a half step down now compared to a full step down. So I think all the stars are kind of aligning here for Alex Marquez to really make that kind of step and win a Grand Prix this year and maybe not challenge for the title, but to be challenging for that top 3, I think is a realistic goal for him.
So is your top 2 or top 2 and 3? Is it Pecco and
Pecco and Alex?
Alex? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll jot that down. So well, at least I think we've all got Pecco in second. So if you're listening, Pecco, which you probably aren't, sorry about that. So we are, but yeah, prove us wrong. That's come back in November time and prove us wrong. That's what we want to see. Best manufacturer. I mean, hear me out. Right. I don't want to say most improved, or I just want to say it's a kind of open question. The best manufacturer in your eyes, who do you think it's going to be? You can judge it off steps made, or purely constructors and who's top of it. It could be whoever you feel like. Pete, start with you.
I think, yeah, if you look at biggest improvers, then you look at the guys that are down the bottom at the moment, don't you? So you're looking at Honda and Yamaha. And let's remember, they've got concessions. They can develop the bike during the year. So certainly they should improve the most during the season. They're not in this engine freeze and everything else. They can use one more aero upgrade, all that kind of stuff. So I think with Honda and Yamaha, we can expect them to get closer as the year goes on. I was interviewing some of the management from Yamaha, and they sort of expect the development to just continue in a line, to get closer and closer as it goes on. Whereas the other factories, you get a sort of a big spike in development over the winter, obviously, because that's when they do their new parts, and then everything's kind of frozen for them, and they can't make such a big step during the year. So, Yamaha, it looks poised, doesn't it, to make a step. How big a step we don't know. The rear grip issue, is that still a problem? Cotterari, the trouble is Cotterari, he had those problems with the tyres, didn't he? Front tyres, rear tyres, that I think sort of has just put a little bit of a question mark there, because he couldn't really seem to understand it either. He just didn't feel comfortable with the tyres. The other Yamahas seem to feel okay with them. Well, is that just going to be a one-off thing or not? Then you've got Luca Marini saying loads of rear grip in testing. We all know our problem is the lack of rear grip. So again, have we really made as big a step as it looks like in testing? We've seen the bikes, Honda, look like they've had a great winter, and then it's racing comes around and they decide the engine is not there. So, putting aside Ducati, who look like they've still got a clear advantage over the others, I think probably Yamaha are in that position where they're targeting certainly Aprilia and KTM. That's their next step. That's what they told me at Sepang. They know that Ducati, you've got to go step by step. You can't just aim to take on Ducati straight away. And the next step for them is to be fighting with KTM and Aprilia. And I think that's a realistic target. Maybe even might they even be out of concessions by the end of this year? That's
good point.
That's another one. It was a question I put to Max Bartolini and others, and they said, look, we want to be out as soon as we can because we want to go fast as soon as we can. So let's see if they can achieve that.
Lewis, what's your take on manufacturers and who's going to be the best and improve? Blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think if you look at it in terms of overall improvement, overall, just everything overall, I think Yamaha is kind of the one I think everyone is looking at. Can they make that step? Can they just prove that really all the things that they've been saying before, not having a satellite team, the little bits and pieces of the bike that were missing before, that they said if we have those, we'll go quicker. Now that they have those, does that prove to be true? And I think if that is the case, then you can kind of look at Yamaha as really being that sort of best manufacturer in a kind of a roundabout sense. I think the concessions thing is an interesting one because everyone's obviously talking about they can develop things, V4 engine, blah 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 blah. They put a V4 engine on track in a race situation for all of its riders. They are then obviously setting them back in terms of, certainly for someone like Quartararo.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the guy who is going to be leading the charge in terms of results. You then put him on an engine, he's going to have to then try and adapt his riding style around, as we saw from Maverick Vinales when he went from inline 4 to V4 when he joined the Aprilia. It took him the best part of about a year and a half to kind of get used to it because it was so different. The riding style is so different. Losing the concessions in a way would actually be beneficial for Yamaha, I think, because it kind of removes that sort of, do we put the V4? Who do we give it to? It almost say, okay, well, the V4 has to be parts now. We'll evaluate it in the winter. We focus now everything on the inline. And so I think that as a manufacturer looking to kind of push its way up the grid, that would almost be good for them. I think losing the concessions, it would remove quite a big complicated issue of how do we test it, do we race it, depending on how advanced it is. If they end up quite quickly out of concessions, and obviously it's a project they can really put on the back burner and think, what do we do now in terms of 2027? Ultimately, if they can be successful on the current engine formula that they have, they don't really then need to change that for 2027. And I think blaming their problems on it being having an inline four has sort of been an easy kind of way out for a lot of people, because it's the same engine they've had for a long time, and they've had plenty of success with it. So yeah, I think there's a lot kind of riding on this season as well for Yamaha in terms of future direction, because it would be very easy for them to then put all this hard work in place, get to a point, and then they go, okay, we'll try the V4, and then they get completely lost again. And then they've we've got it to a stage that we can't go back. So much like Honda when it went with its kind of previous change of philosophy a few years ago, that really kind of stunted Marquez's problems, and they were like, we can't go back now. Whereas everyone was like, well, if he had the 2021 bike right now, he would win. And you don't want to be in that position. So I think it's almost in Yamaha's best interest for its future to really hit the ground running and really just get those results and get out of concessions as quick as it can, because it removes some headaches for it.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. That would be my answer to Yamaha. I think the good point you both made about that step out of concessions. If a team can do that this year, I think it kind of proves that they've came a long way, to be honest. And we've only had a year of the concessions, but it's a good thing to have. But as you said, Pete, they want to be out of it because it's the pride thing, isn't it? They want to be standing on their own 2 feet, almost like we can match you now on an equal footing after that help that they've been given. And Yamaha, for me, are that team that are going to make the jump. And I like having them up there. I don't know. Maybe it's the Rossi thing growing up for me. Just them always being at the front sort of thing. I think that's probably it. And I like them as a brand. I like the noises coming out of their camp. I love how complimentary Davide Tardazzi is towards Max Bartolini. I think when you understand that someone has gone from Ducati to Yamaha and they've kind of implemented their own way of working and it's going up, I think, yeah, that shows a real clear sign of direction. For me, I've got one question for both of you. Will we see a Honda and a Yamaha at any point of the year on the podium? Yes or no answer. Lewis, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I think we will.
Wow, okay. Pete?
Are we talking sprints as well? I know I'm breaking
I'll get anything. I'll give you anything, yep.
And the question is Honda or Yamaha, or Honda and Yamaha?
But not on the same podium, but just
Yamaha, I think, yes. I mean, let's face it, Quartararo really, he should have had the Jerez one last year, didn't he? That got whipped away. Okay, exceptional circumstances with the damp. But yeah, I think Yamaha for sure. Honda, yeah, why not? Why not? I think there'll be some sort of situation. Again, might be a damp track, might be a wet race. Yeah, I think the bike seems to be rideable now, doesn't it? The Honda, the words coming from Mia, they haven't got the engine power. It's funny, isn't it? We've seen the momentum goes with the direction. One time it was not enough straight line performance for the Japanese, and they were pushing for more power. Now they seem to be going back towards we need the handling first, and we're seeing the progress from Honda. Now they've got the handling, but of course they haven't got the power, so that bit will follow. But let's see how much the Hondas do suffer with this lack of top speed at the moment. Whether the lap time is obviously better, but it might be that as Cal Crutchlow said a few years back, wasn't it? He thought the Yamaha needs to be a Yamaha. It makes its time in the corners. So let's see if they do suffer in the corners or in the straight, as much as they fear, I think, at the moment after testing. But it might be that, it's not that bad, that maybe, this push for straight line, top speed is not the direction, and they're finding the direction. And just one more thing on the concessions, I think it would be good to see somebody move up the ladder, just because that's what the concessions system is for, isn't it? It's not meant to be a static thing that everyone just stays in A, B, C, or D. You're supposed to sort of move around, aren't you? And nobody's moved yet since this system has come into place. So really, for it to be a success, we should see manufacturers moving up and down. We should see Ducati ultimately coming down to maybe B. We should see the others going up to C. I think B and C are where they imagine all of the manufacturers should be in the end, isn't it? That sort of middle group. At the moment, no one's moving. So it'd be good to see that. And probably a related one, I don't know. But this Ducati engine decision, freezing it for 2 years, they're going to run the same engine for 3 years. Maybe in these times of costs and things like that, it makes you wonder, do we really need, especially if you're in the A concession ranking, do we really need new engines every year? Maybe that's something for the future concessions when we're looking at cutting costs, and maybe you shouldn't be able to update your engine every year if you are the dominant manufacturer. And that would also help keep the cost down a bit. Who knows? But, it looks like Ducati, well, as I say, it'll be a 3-year-old engine by the end of 26, won't it? And so whoever's designed that GB24, I hope they've got a, I don't know, some sort of whatever you get back in Bologna, some sort of, I don't know, plaque or at least a reserved parking place or something. You know what I mean, at the factory, just to because I'm sure that for race wins at least, let's imagine after 3 years that bike will be up there with the best we've seen in MotoGP history. I would imagine
100%. It'll be up there with the first Honda, so it will have the MotoGP era. Well, that's the way I think it will be, and it kind of bookends that era almost. It's like, you've got that dominance of it. So yeah. And good point about the concessions. People might go up. Let's see if people drop down. That's actually interesting. And keep an eye on that for, I think, after. When is it? They update it after Sachsenring, isn't it? Usually halfway.
Summer break is the next one. Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on that and how the teams go. Penultimate question, Rookie of the Year. Maybe we've got 3 of them. I'll start. I'm caught between Agura and Aldegar. For me, I think I'm going to go Aldegar purely because of the Ducati. I think that might just be a step above. But for me, Agura, I think is going to be so fast. At whatever point when he really clicks. I mean, it's clicked already with him in testing, but I think he's got the more raw, natural talent. And I can't wait to see what he can do. Lewis, who's your Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I agree. I think Ogura is probably the better rider, but the Ducati is just a better bike than the Aprilia, and I think that's ultimately for a rookie. This is what Ducati's aim was by removing the kind of number of factory bikes from its roster, was that they'd see that a rookie doesn't really need that kind of complication. If you put them on an already sorted year-old bike, that will speed up their adaptation, and we have seen that before. Obviously, people like Bastianini, Bez, quite good examples of getting up to speed really quickly. So yeah, I think kind of circumstantially, Aldeguer is the better place to be top rookie this year, despite the fact I think Ogura is probably the more naturally talented. And Ogura, I think, is going to be one of those riders that will maybe not quite have the consistency on the Aprilia yet this year, but the kind of top results will be better than Aldeguer's, but they'll obviously just be limited in terms of when we see them.
Yeah, just a clip from MotoGP's Unseen from the Bangkok launch. Marc Marquez telling Agura he's the new Japanese star, and Agura's kind of laughing. He's like, "It's your turn now." I was like, "Well, nice one, Mark. Way to put pressure on him," sort of thing. Pete, who's your Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, you guys are completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, it should be Aldeguer. I'm going to go Agura though, just because I'm impressed by when you look at where he was. Barcelona test was he about 20th or something, and then he finishes 10 places higher by the end of the Birmingham test. Obviously, that's only one lap pace. It's not race pace or anything. But I think that progression was impressive. There weren't many others that did it. I think Mir, Miller, maybe Bez sort of made that. On the single lap time, that sort of step over the winter, if you like. Aldeguer, the Birmingham test, really impressive at Sepang, Aldeguer, and then the Birmingham test seemed to, where was he, down the order 18th, I think, wasn't he, at the end? So, for sure, that bike, it should be competitive everywhere. He can take the data from all of these other experienced riders who all have the same engine as him now as well. So he should be up there. He's got Frankie Carcetti, as we know, who can guide him in the right direction. So, yeah, Agura, we've seen him, he sort of builds, doesn't he, as he did with his Moto2 title last year. So, again, it all depends on whether the Aprilia is a consistent machine or not. But if Agura does keep improving like this, maybe he can overcome the limitations of the machine. And I think it'll be a close battle between Agura and Aldeguer. So, either one of them. But I'll go Agura just to be different. There we are.
Yeah. I think with Agura, he really underestimates himself and kind of told me that at Silverstone. He said to Dorna as well at the end of last year, he doesn't see himself as a person that has great natural talent. But then when you see him on a bike, he looks great. His style is really, it's really modern looking, but it has that kind of old style to it. It's a really neat looking rider. And Alex Rins actually said in another video on MotoGP.com, the biggest person that surprised him at the shakedown test from the Barcelona test was Agura. And he says he couldn't believe where he was braking and how he was able to follow him and actually get past him. And Rins was, when Alex Rins is saying that, multiple Grand Prix winner, MotoGP, there's something there. And I think, Agura's got the right temperament for it. He's so relaxed anyway. So I think, it'll be a good, interesting battle. I think it'll be the first time in a few years that we've actually had a challenge
Yes,
for Rookie
true.
of the Year, because Augusto Fernandez won it by default, and so did Pedro Acosta, because there was no other one to challenge them. So finally a Rookie of the Year battle. So let's see how that one goes, so we can review it potentially midway through the season and see how they stack up. And the one everyone wants to hear, World Champion MotoGP, just to add, I'll put in after myself and our other colleague Alex Whitworth, we're going to discuss Moto 2 and Moto 3, given our predictions there. But we'll stick with MotoGP here. Lewis, MotoGP World Champion, who's it going to be?
Ralph Fernandez, I said earlier. It's going to be Mark. Like it just is going to be Mark. He's back, unless there's an injury. Like on pure performance, he's not being beaten to this championship. It isn't happening.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, you could work it out from our number 2s and 3s, can you, predictions? But yeah, I mean, it looks like everything is in place for Mark. As I say, I think this is going to be the most complete Marc Marquez we've seen, and it's his big chance to get this title. He's been waiting many years for now, isn't he? And I don't think he's going to let it slip away. But things don't always go to plan, so let's see. But certainly, I think from where we are now, he is the clear favourite for me.
Yeah. It's Marc Marquez for me, so it's a clean sweep. I think when he targeted 2025 in his plan, as he said, to be the year he fights for a world title, when he has that in his head, and he's Marc Marquez, I think what he's shown already in pre-season is something that, I think it should have a lot of people worried outside of the, not the Ducati camp, but just everyone, because, it's the story, I think, that can drive this. If he wins a world title 5 years after that injury, and he does it and he equals Valentino Rossi while beating Valentino Rossi's protege in the factory Ducati setup, I think it'll be one of the best moments that MotoGP's ever had, to be honest. It'll be something that a lot of people will enjoy, but I'll go back to how I think he's going to win it. I don't think it's going to be Marquez of old in 2019, for example. But I think the races that he will dominate. That makes sense. Like we've seen in Aragon. You can arguably say Phillip Island, he was incredibly strong. If it wasn't for that bad start, he probably would have won it easily. It'll be that sort of Marquez where he'll just know his chances and he'll know when he needs to take his risks, essentially. The key is, will his mentality switch, and will he be able to keep himself on a level where he knows he needs to bag points sometimes if he's not trying to push that thing? That's something I'm trying to say. I hope that he can figure it out that way, because I want a good battle between him and Pecco. In that sense, I want to see if Bagnaia has grown from last year because of all the mistakes, but I think Marquez should have him. Lewis, I see you smiling there.
I see where you're coming from, and I kind of largely agree, but I don't think Mark's going to miss up the opportunity to kind of wipe Pecco's nose in it at certain circuits where we know Pecco's strong. Assen, for example, Mugello. I think, well, yes, he will be a bit more reserved. Marquez is a killer at the end of the day, and one of the key things that has always helped him to a world champ or a factor in his world championships is how he's, not only just the results, but it's the way he's gone about the results and the way he's kind of mentally sort of broken his team, like his rivals, and I just see there being an opportunity, Jerez, for example, if it's Pecco versus Mark again, like it was last year, he's not gonna he's not going to lift.
No, exactly.
He's not going to lift. And, when it gets to Assen, for example, we know it's a circuit that Mark can be quick around anyway. He's not going to miss the opportunity if he can be faster than Pecco to kind of just, chip away. It's not just the results. It's even chipping away at those, because when you've got a rider, when you're on the back foot in the championship, you've got strong tracks coming up. You go, okay, I can do well here. I can do well here. You then have got your rival being better than you, or at least putting you under a significant threat at those circuits. All of a sudden you go, oh, well, where's my advantage? I think that's going to happen. And I don't think Mark's going to miss the opportunity to make sure that his 7th MotoGP world title, doesn't come with some sort of kind of nod towards his arch nemesis, Valentino. I think we're all expecting at some point Valentino will get a bit noisy in the press, depending on how that rivalry goes between Mark and Pecco. It's 10 years on from 2015, let's not forget. And I just think there's all those little things there that, yeah, the real kind of assassin that we've known Mark to be will just to come out again. And yeah, he's kind of playing it down a bit as being this, I'm older and wiser, blah, blah, blah. I think there will be a point this season where that old Marquez comes out again. There's going to be, the knife between his teeth. And that'll be fun to watch, I think, for everyone. I think that's what we all want to see.
Yeah. I kind of want to see it to believe it, that kind of side, because I haven't seen it in so long, sort of thing. You kind of seen it little bits of last year, like the smile kind of disappears and you see that sort of the factory Marquez comes out again, but it's like that.
Austin was a good example of that before the race.
He was really like very on Mark has taken himself away from the grid, and yeah, if I see that sort of look again, you're like, oh, Jesus, he's here to play, sort of thing. Pete, what's any final thoughts you think on the title battle? If it's going to play out a certain way, what way do you think?
Firstly, when you guys were talking, I thought, do you think Mark will win more races than Pecco? No, on the face of it, it's exactly. And then you think, well, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised actually if it doesn't. You can make the argument either way, couldn't you? So that again, that's another interesting one as to whether Mark will pick his battles and go for the kill when he's got the advantage or when he feels like he needs to sort of stamp his authority, and then at other times just take the points. We've seen both sides of Mark, haven't we? Will he follow Pecco in qualifying? Even something as obvious as that. Well, can you imagine that at Burry if qualifying begins the first round of the year and we see Mark, because we know how much that annoyed the other riders. We know Pecco doesn't agree with it and he doesn't do it himself. And Pecco's very clear. If he says he's not doing something, he doesn't do it, does he? It'll only take something like that to sort of spark things, won't it? And and just also, you guys are raising good points that, Mark putting his authority, and going back to what Lewis said about following Quartararo all those years ago at Sepang and falling off, that's just one thing that maybe could be a weakness for him. If he does feel that he needs to stamp his authority when actually he doesn't, but he thinks like, I need to get one over on this guy. And it was a bit like that with Quartararo at Sepang, wasn't it? Everyone was, why are you following Fabio but it was because he could see the threat that Fabio was at that time, wasn't it? He was the up-and-coming guy, and as you guys have said, we were all hoping for this big battle between them in the coming years that was lost because of Mark's injury. But Mark knew the threat that Quartararo was. He's following him qualify when he didn't need to. The championship was already wrapped up, and he had that sort of nasty high side. Now, I think he will have to be a little bit careful of not getting sucked into those situations again, of not letting his pride, if you like, almost get in the way of the championship picture. So that'll be interesting as well. There's so many different angles on this as to how, even from Burry Run, imagine if one of them has some problem and misses out on Q2, suddenly the momentum changes. Does the other one then pile the pressure on, or do they then back off and take points? There's going to be, it's going to seesaw, I think, back and forth in these early rounds. And then when we get to Europe, we'll kind of see things established. But yeah, it's interesting about the race wins, I thought, because at first Mark should win a lot. And then you think how much Pecco won last year and the speed he's got. Maybe not. I don't know.
It's hard to say for me. I don't know, because Marquez is really good in the sprints, but he's also very good in the Grand Prix. It's like last year, it was like he would do look at the sprints last year where he was out of position. He would do the same results 2 days in a row, and you're like, he's done over a shorter and then a longer. How's he doing this sort of thing? on that question, you'll have more sprint wins, I think, than Bagnaia. I think they'll be very close in Grand Prix wins, I think.
Yeah, fair point.
I don't think Ducati are going to, the factory side, just Ducati in general, I don't think they're going to win. What did they win last year in total? It was something like some ridiculous amount of races. It was like 40, wasn't it, or something?
40-something races.
Yeah, I don't think
right,
they're going to
yeah.
win that amount. I think we're going to see. Actually, I don't know. Maybe we might see. I think we'll see more Ducati race winners. That makes sense, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. Actually, I think in my head I'm saying there definitely is going to be more winners, but I don't know who. I think it's going to come down to consistency. To be honest, I think Marquez has shown last year, consistency wise, if he has a bad qualifying, he can rectify it. And yeah, he did crash out of some races, but he was kind of like third place, I think, at Sepang. He crashed out. He was pushing so much to stay up with those two who were so fast. Yeah, if it comes down to it, he doesn't crack for me, and that's the key. He just knows the limits. I think he goes into this almost different dimension on a race day, where he sees things differently to everyone else, especially at the starts of races, where he can place his bike and then overtake like 6 people at once. Think back to, was it Mandalika? Where he done it, and you're thinking, how have you even done that sort of thing?
I think one of the races that stood out for me as well was the final round of Barcelona last year. That's typically always been a track that Mark's he's always said, he's like, I really don't expect much from this. And the fact that he was able to shadow Pecco the way that he was, he couldn't quite put that move on, but GP24 versus very old GP3 at that point, GP23 at that point, and also the limitations in overtaking. And I think Mark, with Pecco fighting for a championship, wasn't really going to risk a move there. But I think that was kind of one of those events where you look at, it's a track he doesn't like very much, and yet he was right up there, right behind Pecco for the whole race. And I think you just transfer that onto a GP 24.9 or whatever we'll call it, a GP 25, because I mean, officially that's what it's designated.
What's it going to be called next year then? Is it like a 24?
Well, they'll do
whatever.
What they did it for 10 years ago, where they had the GP 14.2. Remember
that's
when
right, yeah.
That evolutionary step? So I suspect them for GP 25. Well, I mean, they're not developing the engine. They can completely redevelop the bike if they wanted. So I guess it will be a 26. But I just think there was just flashes last year where Mark was like that Sepang race you mentioned there, Jordan, where he crashed out, but the field behind that top two after that point was 10 seconds, and that included a GP24. Well, it included 2 GP24s when you factor in Bassini and Morbidelli. So you just transpose that onto this year when he's got the bike underneath him, and it's hard to look past, how he just doesn't be up there every single weekend. And also, we can't overstate the fact that personal life thing that he's got. I think it's the first time when he's had both the kind of the successful side of things on track and that really positive kind of personal life side. It clearly relaxes him. I think Mark's always kind of come around and been quite highly strung at points because the pressure's been on him, but he's obviously got such a high standard for himself. I think now he's kind of got that quite grounded sort of thing going on at home and behind the scenes that, it will all feed into it. It'll feed back and forth. And I think I'm not saying Pecco has a terrible life at home or anything, far from it, but he's obviously the one that's got the pressure on him this year because he lost the championship last year, he crashed a lot last year, and he's got Marc Marquez as a teammate, whereas Mark doesn't win the championship. He's already won 6. It's that kind of thing as well, and there's all these little things that just align for Mark this year, I think.
Yeah, one thing I want to take away from 25, I want to see Alex Marquez stick one on his brother. I want to see them two have a proper battle. I'd love to see how that dynamic could play out. As you say, Mark kind of knows his brother, and I think it's the first time he's went, geez, you're quick this year. Not the same team anymore as well, different colours. So I think, City want to get one on Marc Marquez. That would be pretty fun to watch. I'd love to see how that would play out if they both were in the gravel trap together. That would be pretty tasty to watch and see how they go down there. But yeah, that's our predictions. Done and dusted. Come back in, don't know how many days time, months time, whatever. Come back and then you can review, see if we think we've got any right. Hope we have. And yeah, if you enjoyed, tell us your predictions. Don't be afraid. Let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And don't be deleting them in 8 months' time if you've got them wrong. I'll take screenshots, so I'll keep receipts of you in the comments if you're going to come back at us. So yeah, let us know if you're listening. Follow, hit that little bell icon that will be notifying you of every episode that we have this year. 5-star review on Apple and Spotify to help us go up the charts. And yeah, 2025 is here. And let's see what happens. Take care.